Today's featured author is Robert E. Kearns. His first novel was High Brazil, Island of Eternity. And that book received a five-star pick from Reader's Favorite. It also received the Pencraft Awards in 2019. And the book is inspired by the mythical island of High Brazil, said to have existed off the coast of Ireland. In this beautiful novel, Robert takes us on an adventure into the mythical island of High Brazil. He's also composed some anthologies, the Book of Mostly Gibberish, with some good stuff too, he says, as well as some poems and short stories. The award-winning author Robert E. Kearns serves up the most wonderful collection of humorous poems, hilarious sketches, and entertaining short stories. He's got a couple of other books up his sleeves, and his latest book is called Freedom is for the Few, but we'll leave it to Robert to tell us some more about his awesome writings. Stay with us. We'll be back with Robert in just a bit. And welcome to Books with Bridgetti. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa. And the live stream is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. So a very special welcome if you are watching us on Amazon Live. Please remember to unmute and follow us so you can get some more backstories from authors on this particular show. Also, if you are following currently on Twitter or YouTube, a warm welcome to you. I am monitoring the comments, so do say hello. If you've got any questions for our author for today, then please feel free to post those in the comments. I'm sure Robert will be happy to take some questions from you. So if you haven't met Robert Kearns yet, he was born in Dublin. He worked in the accounting and finance departments of several multinational organizations in diverse industries, both in Ireland and in Texas, where he lived for 9 years. His world experiences and background are evident in the kind of writing that he does, and it shows the maturity and discernment to the plot and characterizations. He currently lives and writes in Dublin, and his first novel, as I mentioned earlier, was called High Brazil. But let's not waste any more time. We actually do want to be talking to Robert. Robert, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. How are you? It's been a while since we've chatted.
It's been a while, yes. I've been on the Writers Corner live show twice. And I think we did the anniversary special as well, which I believe was last year, I think it was. And
Yes. Well, can you believe it?
It's great to be back.
We're coming up for the third anniversary of the Writers Corner.
Oh, really? Oh,
I know.
We must do another broadcast.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh my goodness, can't wait for that to happen. But great to have you back. We are live on Amazon, Twitter, and YouTube. Shall we start with
fantastic?
Tell us a little bit about how you got to become an author. I mean, all of us have got stories and to tell, but how did you become an author? Tell us a little bit about your author story.
Well, my author story began a few years ago. It's like many people probably, they always want to think that they can write a book and then they never get around to doing it.
Yep,
And
pretty
I was
much.
one of those people. Yeah, I was one of those people for a long, long time. And then I was talking with my niece one day, and she said that she'd like to write a book. And of course, I said, well, here I am 40 something years later, and I still haven't gotten around to it. So I hope that you start young and fulfill your dreams. But I came home and I started thinking about that, and I said, well, look, here's me telling somebody else that they should go ahead and write their book, and I haven't done it. So I sat down and I began to write. And that's how I wrote my first book, and I haven't stopped since. It took me many decades to get going, and now you can't shut me up. I just like one of the there's a fountain of stuff just pouring out.
I believe it
Wonderful.
becomes an
When you
addiction
start
once you.
writing, yes, that's exactly it. It does become an addiction. I just finished a new book at the end of April, and I published it. And on the 1st of May, I started writing again. And I've banged out 15,000 words so far this month. So it just keeps flowing. I have these new ideas. I want to finish. The problem with me is that I want to finish one book so that I can get started on something
The next
new, and I
one.
lose patience with myself. Yeah, so you kind of end up losing patience with yourself. You go, I want to finish this thing. I want to finish this thing because I've got this other idea going on in my head, and I need to get that down on paper. And so, yes, I think it does become a bit of an addiction, but it's a fun addiction, and it's for anybody who is a writer. It's nice to have a few stories up your sleeve that you can just put out onto paper. And I don't want to be one of these people who's sitting around for years on end waiting for the next big idea. And so far, so good. I've
So
got a few
far, so
things
good.
written down that I'm really happy with. Yeah,
So let's start with
so
High
all
Brazil.
good.
Tell us a bit about High Brazil.
Well, that was the book that I started to write a few years ago after speaking with my niece. And I had seen some articles in the newspaper about this mythical island that was said to have existed off the west coast of Ireland. And it appeared on maps from the 16th century Spanish maps. So there was a belief that an island existed, and it pops up in mythology every so often. And in fact, I've seen it since then several times in newspaper articles. I've seen it on YouTube. It's been on the History Channel as part of their Ancient Aliens series. Like, it crops up
Amazing.
all over the place. Yeah, so I said to myself, well, wouldn't that be a nice idea to write something about that? So I ended up inventing a history for this island as if it did exist, and the protagonist and ends up getting destroyed in the end, but it did exist at one time. So I had a little bit of fun with that, and it was a good experience to learn how to write. I probably ought to revisit that book again at some stage, just not at the moment, but I think that I've learned a lot from it. I think your first novel is probably going to be the toughest, and if you get
Yeah.
through that one, I think it becomes easier from then on in. And you'd probably go back and revisit your old work and think, I can make a few improvements here and there. So that's probably on the agenda for sometime in the future. I will have a look again and see where I made my mistakes. But I also think that it was a good story. It was interesting, and some people seem to like it. It got a few good reviews, and it won an award. So all in all, it's inspired me to keep going. So first book, always your little baby, and you always remember that, and it's a great experience to go through. So I would recommend it for any
Absolutely.
budding authors out there. Get your book done, please, people. I come across I don't mean to be bad, but I do come across some people who've been writing the same book for 10 years and still haven't finished it. And you know what? I think finish such an important thing because it will give you that confidence to go on and continue to write and to continue to put your stories down on paper. And believe me, you will get better at it. You do get better with practice. And
Fantastic.
so anybody who wants to write a book, please finish your book and get it out there and get it done, and then move on, and you will have great fun and you'll enjoy it, and the writing will become part of you. You might become a little bit addicted to it, but it will become part of you.
Well, a friend of mine in Canada, he always says, you've got to have a chapter one. You can't have a book without a chapter one. So just get started and keep going. So we all got to start
Yes.
somewhere. The first book may not be perfect, it may not be a bestseller, but who cares? You just got to get that
Who
first book
cares?
out there. Not everyone gets
That's
to become an
brilliant
author, so
advice,
just
Bridgetti.
get it out.
Get it out.
And
That's it's just super advice. And even on subsequent books, I actually just had this conversation with somebody the other day, and they have published a book previously, but it took them, they haven't written anything since, and they wanted to start a new book, and they were all worried about the first few pages. And I said, look, that's a start. You have
just
to
get it,
start at
just
the
get it
start and
done.
start and and just get it done and keep writing, and then just it'll all come out, and you can always go back to fix it later in the editing process. That's what editing is for. But if you've got
Mm.
a story in your head, get it down on paper and come back and revisit it afterwards, and then you can clean it up and do all the great things with it. And
So when
that
did you
is a
write
part of
your
writing.
So when did you write your poems? Did you start with the poems first, or did you
No, I
write
actually
hybrid
came
still
along.
first?
I came along with that later. What happened was I wrote my
Okay.
first novel, and then I was kind of in this period where I was going, well, what do I do, and what's next now that I've written this book? And I started writing some short stories, and then I started writing some poems, and then I decided that I'm going to release the poems and short stories into several volumes. Well, not several volumes. I started off with one volume, and one volume became two volumes. And then it turned into a third book called Words of a Feather, which was another interesting collection of poems and short stories, which I really enjoyed writing. And then I wrote the Book of Mostly Gibberish, which I have here. That's another. You can see it's fairly substantial. And that's another
Wow.
collection of poems and short stories. And between all that, I was writing books, and I wrote a novella as well. So I have that one here too, which is just a novella. So um, you're right. It's an addiction. You become a busy boy or girl when you start to become, when you start writing stuff down and publishing it.
That's
But it is
amazing.
great
I
fun.
just want I just want to give a quick shout out to Edna Lugo on Amazon and also to Michael's Favorite Things. Thanks for the follow. So if you are watching us on Amazon Live, remember to unmute and remember to follow. That'll be fantastic. Um, Michael says, such an impressive story on how you let himself change genres of writing. Tell us a bit about that. I mean, is it how easy or how difficult do you find it switching?
Um, it's not so much. Well, maybe it is genre. Some people. I don't think that it's a different genre. I was actually thinking about this just yesterday, and I was going, "Do I have different genres or don't I?" I think that I write. Possibly, if you want to say yes, I'm a poet. I like to write poetry. I do like to write poetry. I often write it as an inspiration for my short stories, and I find that you can put down very succinct ideas in your poetry, and then you can develop them out at times into a longer story. And if you're stuck on something when you're writing a book or a novel or a novella, I find as well that to free your mind, a poem is a really great tool for doing that. So I don't really consider it a switch of genre. I just kind of find it as a switch of how to open your mind to release your ideas. And maybe other people would consider it a switch in genre, but I don't. Now, as regards as the short stories, it is a different technique, and it's not. It is. It's certainly. It is a different method of writing, and it's hard to explain to somebody who hasn't written both. But I probably think there are times when I think that I'm better at writing short stories, And there are other times that I think that I'm better at writing novels, but they are so different in how you tackle them. Because the short story, everything has to be word perfect, everything has to be concise. Your
Sort of like,
ideas
would you
have to
say
be
you
put down
have
on
to be
paper in such a
more
way.
intentional about your writing?
Yeah, you have to be more direct and intentional, but you can still pack a lot in. I have some, the reviews that I have gotten from my short stories are incredible. Um, I've had, I tend to put them up on readers' favorite for reviews. But when you get people saying to you that your short stories are some of the best stories they've ever read in their life, that's like amazing feedback to get. And you know that it's genuine. I mean, it feels genuine in the way that they write their review. So, but I very deep. I get very, very deep in my short stories, and you have to put yourself into a mindset where you're going to get everything down in the shortest or short-ish um, piece of time, and
Mm.
get it to such a space that your words and your sentences convey everything that they need to convey in a condensed manner. It's like zipping up a large file for your computer and just you're squashing it down. But you can also say a huge amount. And however, with the novel writing, it's the other way around. You have to expand on everything and you have to fill out the pages. And
Mm.
it can often be a little bit more laborious. I like writing short stories simply for the fact that sometimes I get bored with myself. As I said, I want to move on to the next thing. And if I'm writing something for 3 or 4 months, I'm already at that stage where I'm thinking about the next idea. So,
Oh
in
my
that
goodness,
respect,
Robert.
yeah, in that respect, I like the short story format because it can take you a couple of weeks or it can take you a month for a novella, perhaps. And you don't feel at the end of it that you're kind of just racing towards an end. You're everything is direct. You're so focused on what you have to do, and even the editing process is minimizing your words. Every word must count, and there are no wasted words. In a short story, there should never be a wasted word. That's my philosophy. I like to try and keep to that. And the information that you convey must tell the reader everything that they need to know. Whereas with a novel, you can kind of play around with words, you can play around with dialogue, you can play around with your settings. There's a lot more scope in writing a novel, but it also can be at times it can be a little bit difficult because you know that you have to fill out more pages. And so the mindset is totally different, and it is hard to switch from a short story to a novel or a novel back to a short story. So in that respect, you have to kind of give yourself maybe a few days break and reset your brain. You have to get your brain into the short story mode, or get your brain into the novel writing mode, and that can be tricky for some people. So yes, it's hard to do. It is kind of hard to do, but I get around it. I just get around it. I know what I need to do. I try to play it out in my head beforehand. I don't know if it's a good idea. If you can almost picture the story in your brain and how many words it's going to take up in advance, I find that that makes the process easier for me.
Mm.
That's how I do it.
Michael says it amazes him the numbers of feature length movies that started as short stories. That pretty much coincides with your observations of having short stories being very intentional. So he kind of agrees with what you're saying. Um,
I that, yes, I've heard it. I've heard this before. Somebody else in one of my writers groups said this to me about short stories. I said, "Look, nobody reads the short stories," which is true. They don't want to buy them. They don't want to read them because they think I'm wasting my 99 cents on something that's only going to be 18 or 20 pages, and I'd rather just buy a book. But they can also be missing out on something magical and brilliant and pure. And in that respect, if a film producer or a movie producer sees a short story that
that
captures
they
them, they
like.
don't want to always right, and they don't always want to sit through a full book. They like to work off scripts for starters. But second best to a script is probably a short story because they can read a short story in an hour and they know, is this something that I can do? If can I make a film out of this, or can I make a movie out of this? They know straight away. They don't have to read through 300 pages in order to decide whether something is any good or not. They can read a short story and in a very short space of time make up their mind as to whether it's powerful and compelling and would translate to the big screen. So yes, that's probably why short stories do better than full-length novels. In not all the time, but some of the time, as regards movie making.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just my
Tell
two
us a
cents
little bit
worth on it,
about.
anyway.
Wow, your 2 cents is worth a lot more than 2 cents, Robert.
Try telling that to the readers who won't spend 99 cents on my short stories. I have some really good short stories,
hopefully
and I
now that
love
they
them.
get. Well, this is the point of having you on Amazon Live, so hopefully
All
the
right.
people getting to know you a bit better will go and have a look at your short stories now.
Yeah, great.
So tell me
That's
about
what
a
we want.
sporting life. What's the
A
sporting life
sporting
all
life.
about?
Yes, a sporting life, right. This is historical fiction. And it's a story that I had wanted to write. I think it was 2 Christmases ago. You know, when we're talking about developing short stories for movies, sometimes I take a movie as an inspiration or part of a movie as inspiration for a short story. And I don't, it's not that I'm copying, I'm not ripping anybody off, but sometimes a flicker of an idea from a scene or a relationship or something will give me an idea for a story. So I had an idea for a sporting life. I was thinking to myself, in pioneering times in America, people traveled from east to west. They went on the Oregon Trail, and there was this huge migration across the Great Plains of America. And we often think of the successes in people achieving their dreams, but I wanted to write about some of the hardships that must have happened on these journeys. And we know that they happened. There was something called the Donner Pass, which I think was the Donner Pass, where a huge party of migrants ended up, in horrible winter conditions, and there was cannibalism, there was all sorts of things. But we know that these tough stories and difficult things happen to people who are seeking a better life. And so I wanted to write a story about this young couple who decided there's nothing left. They've just gotten married, they're newlyweds. They decide that, the future really lies out west. If they want to achieve anything and they want to better themselves, and they need to leave the small little town that they're in and travel west. So they join a wagon train on the way out to California or Oregon. But along the way, the poor husband gets sick, he dies, and that
Oh my
leaves the young
gosh.
bride in a situation where now she's alone in the middle of the continent. And it's not like he can phone home and get help. You can't call Western Union and send me some money. You can't turn back. Really, you could either go on or you can stop. And her circumstances were that she decided to go on for a while. She befriends somebody who helps her. But eventually she just decides, look, here, I'm going to stop in the next town, whatever town we meet, the last town could be for hundreds of miles. And I'm going to stop and settle there. And if I can get enough money, I'll try and get back to the East Coast where our parents are. So they come across this town, but her friend, the gentleman that was helping her all the way, that she thought was a friend of hers and was a confidant, he double crosses her and steals all her worldly possessions and carries on the wagon train without her, leaving her almost penniless in a small town. and all she's got is some cash which she had strapped to her waist. And so she meets a blacksmith, and he's trying to give her advice as to what to do. She takes up residence in the local hotel, and then she starts a job in a bar as a bar girl, as almost an entertainer, not as a prostitute, but they did have bar girls back then, and they were expected to entertain the men, and they worked to get them to keep buying drinks, and they were there for entertainment purposes. But in that job, the owner of the saloon makes a pass at her, and she rebuts that, and he fires her. And so she's again without work. She's running out of money, and she decides that nobody wants to hire her because some of the people in the town are extremely judgmental. They think, one set think that because she has a wedding ring on, that she is a man. Something has happened that she shouldn't be working. Why is she working when she's married? And she takes the ring off, and then they say, "Are you trying to forget your dead husband already?" And so there's this conflict of people who are judging her, constantly judging her about her circumstances when they know nothing about her circumstances. They're making assumptions. And all she's trying to do is survive and live and get back home. And so anyway, she finds herself in another awkward situation, and she ends up going to the local brothel and taking up residence there. But it actually becomes a happy story in a way. It's not all doom and gloom. She befriends the madam there. They get on very, very well. And she decides that she kind of, that this is not the typical American dream, but it becomes in a way an American dream for her because she starts to make money and she decides that she's going to stay. And I don't really want to give away the end, but I have to give away the end in order to show that there's redemption.
I was just going to say, you're telling the whole story, but this is so fascinating.
I have to give away
I'm
the
hanging
end
on to every word you're saying.
This is an awful story. It's an awful story. But a sporting life was a euphemism for prostitution in the olden days. And so there's a little bit of banter between the lady who owns this brothel, and she's all highfalutin about it. She gives everybody French names, and she calls herself Madame Giselle, and everything is supposed to be plush and nice and fancy. And so this lady goes to work there, and she befriends the woman, and she starts taking over the management of the place, and she's doing all the bank runs, and she's organizing payments to the girls, and she's if anything gets broken, she calls the carpenter. She does this, she does that. So she's effectively the manager of the bordello. And at the end of it all, when the lady dies, when the original madam dies, she leaves the whole thing to this woman in her will. And so there is a little bit of American dream there.
So the American dream still comes to.
It still comes true, just in a convoluted way. So I had a lot of fun writing this, and it's short. It is only about 17,500 words. It's kind of a novella, and it is succinct, but it does tell a full story in a short space of time. So it's not quite a short story, but it's not quite a novel either. It kind of fits somewhere in the middle, and I really enjoyed writing it.
Oh my gosh! Well,
very
interesting. Very interesting. So if you're watching this, go get that book. Okay,
ebook
Robert.
And paperback. Yeah.
Okay, ebook and paperback. Fantastic. And the last book is Freedom for the Few, right? The one that you don't have a copy of yourself, but I have featured the book on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm waiting on my author copy because I only released it at the end of April. It's called Freedom is for the Few. And now you want to talk about different genres. I've gone now from this historical sporting life to a modern day political thriller. And,
political thriller. Okay, that's a whole different ballgame.
Political thriller. Kind of political. It's businessy and it's political, but it's I take some characters that I often have a common thread of in my books, and I carry them through, and I have an idea in my head of what this person is going to be. So in Freedom of the Few, I had the idea of an oligarch who decided that they didn't like the way things were going in politics and wanted to make a change. And through manipulation and force of personality and money and power, he gets himself into a position where, and blackmail and murder.
Oh
He gets
my
himself into a
goodness.
position. Yes. Oh, he's a
There's
horrible
a lot of
character. He's a
intrigue going
nasty,
on in
nasty,
there.
huge amount of intrigue. He fools all these party bigwigs into thinking that something is going on because he doctors up all these documents and files, and then he ends up completely destroying these people that were supposed to be his friends in order to get where he wants to be. And he creates this whole scenario to put him in a position where he's able to run for president. And
Oh
even when he
wow.
does
Oh
run for president,
wow.
he ensures that he's going to win. And when he does win, the whole theme of it is he wants to be a Caesar. He wants to be a modern day Julius Caesar running the show sort of thing, and a Roman emperor. He's got this whole fanatical thing about him being an emperor. And his upbringing was that he is special. He's something special. He's of the ruling class, as it were, and that only the ruling people should have a say so in what goes on in everyday life. That, that's for them. That, and other people, they should be just taking the orders and listening to what their betters have to say. So he doesn't like democracy too much, but he pretends to like it almost in order to get elected. But once he's elected, he goes ahead and changes everything. So it's a story of how he gets there and what he does when he gets there. And it ends with him. I don't want to really give away anything, but the whole thing is
It sounds so typical of what
Just think of
happens
Roman.
anyway.
Think of Roman Empire. But his whole philosophy was that nothing ever changed, really. In that, human beings have always done this. It's something that's in our DNA, and we've been doing it since the beginning of time. So why shouldn't he do it? That's his whole philosophy. Is, well, this has gone on everywhere since the dawn of time. And I know that I'm good enough to be the emperor, and I should be the emperor. So why don't I just do it? And he goes about, he does it. So he does get there. But there's a whole story about how he gets there. And I had a huge amount of fun writing that as well. All the intrigue, all the fake stuff, all the blackmail, and all the one or two placed murders just to make sure that the witnesses disappear, and that's how he does it. So
Oh
I had
my
a lot of
goodness.
fun
It
with
sounds
that one.
like a typical, if you can believe it, if you believe it, you can become it,
Yeah, well, that's right. He believed it, and he said, and he had the money to do it. You see, he was a multi-billionaire,
Are you sure this
and
is
he
not the story of
believed it.
Donald Trump?
So no, definitely not. No.
I'm really just teasing, okay? I'm not serious.
It's almost a counterpoint. It's something else. It's one of these people who doesn't like. They want to be, they don't want to. They want a Senate, but they want a Roman Senate. They want to be the person who's running everything, and that their cronies are put into positions of power, and the cronies are they're like modern day aristocrats. So that was the whole theme of this thing, was that we were a return to an aristocratic society where the rich and the powerful, who believe that they're better than everybody else, get to take over. So and he does it, but he's a nasty, nasty character, and he doesn't mind bumping a few people off, and he doesn't mind messing around his own friends. And that was the thing that I enjoyed doing, was that these people are ostensibly on the same side of issues and politics and whatnot. But he doesn't. He's such a character that he doesn't mind dumping them when it's convenient for him. So uh,
Well,
I
that's
had a
kind
bit
of
of fun with that.
typical of people in
Really
politics,
enjoyed
isn't
it.
it?
Well, it can be. It certainly can be. I think some politicians tend to be very self-centered people anyway. In order to run for politics, most of us don't want to do that because we're engaged in other things in our life, and we've got better things we think to be doing than to be messing around with stuff like that. I wouldn't want to be a politician. I don't know many people that would. And there's a writer here in Ireland that says anybody that wants to set themselves up as a leader of other people must have some chutzpah about them, to think that they are the person to go ahead and represent somebody else, and it kind of takes an awful lot of ego in order to be that type of person. And so I imagine some of them as being quite psychopathic in many ways, and that's what my character is. He's a psychopath. He really is a psychopath because nobody is of value to him. He doesn't have friends really. He only has people that he can use, and they're only useful to him as long as they're useful to him. And he'll marry to marry in order to get what he wants, and he will have ostensibly friends in order to get him something. So, it's kind of a
Very
common
sort
trait
of
among psychopaths.
a calculating
There's a
character.
conniving, yeah, he's a very conniving character. And that runs through in some of my other books. I wrote a book last year called Carnivore. And it was a CEO of a company, and he was an out and out psychopath, but he was also a serial killer. So,
Oh my
I
goodness.
like messing around. Yeah, I do like messing around these characters. I like the psychological side of it. And I like thinking about putting myself in a position of what would a psychopath do in such and such a situation. And I think I just have an interest in those people. I think they're nasty, but we're also sort of fascinated by them. I've always been fascinated by serial killers. I've been fascinated by people who show one face to society, but you find out years later that they could have been something, there was something completely different. And so that kind of psychological side of things really interests me, and I like writing about that. I find it easy-ish to write things. And people say to you, how do you write stuff like that? And I go, well, to me, that's, if you're having fun with it, it's easier to write. And you can make them as nasty as you want to be because it's words on a page. You can do whatever you want with it. And I love all the manipulation. I love how a person can get other people to do what they want them to do. And
And
I've
that
seen
happens
it.
in
I've
real
seen
life.
it
I
in
mean,
life.
it's scary, isn't it, when
It
you think
happens in
about it?
real life. I draw from experience on some of this stuff. There's people that I have worked with before that I know in my heart and soul that they were pure psychopaths, and so I can relate to it. I can see it because I've seen people that they didn't have friends. They only had people that they used, and friends were not friends, and there were people who only ever thought about themselves first and foremost. And so I can draw on that. And it does happen. We know that these people exist. We know that psychopaths exist in everyday life. I've read some books about it. I've seen documentaries about it. And we just know from, we don't always think that people like that live among us. We think that they're all in
But
jail,
they
and
do.
sometimes they're not in jail, but they do live among us, and they tend to have certain positions. And politics is one of them that psychopaths are drawn to. They can often be CEOs of big companies. Psychopaths can be drawn to those types of positions as well. And they can be in sales. And there are one or two others. Even doctors can tend to be psychopathic, believe it or not. And it's a fascinating subject. If you want to do some study, there are some great books out there that are what do you call it? They're non-fiction books, and there's some amazing studies that go into that type of character. So if you have an interest in the fact, you can turn these things often into fiction, and that's what I like to
So
play around
I
with
want to
some of these
ask you at this
characters.
point, are some of the stories that you've written, are they based on actual people in your life? And would those people be surprised if they discovered you wrote, you based the story on their life?
Well, I don't base it on their life. I base it on their character.
Okay.
So I would take a person that I know in some circumstances, and I would create it in, not in every circumstance. Obviously, I can't go back 200 years and write something from a sporting life. But I do like what I do in this is that I do think about betrayal. I like that theme as well. I love the theme of betrayal. And betraying somebody, which, this is a woman who thought that she had a friend at the worst time in her life when her husband is dead, and this man helps her, and she forms a friendship with him, and he betrays her. I love those themes, but I also like the themes of, as you were saying, these conniving characters, because I have met a few in my lifetime. And it's happened to me. I've been a victim of some of these, of one or two of these
I
people.
think
Certainly,
all
one
of us
person that
have
I
been
can
at
think
some
of.
point.
Yeah, as you get older, and it surprises you because you don't tend to think that it's going to happen to you.
Oh my
Um,
God, Robert,
but it does happen.
I've interviewed some people who have been scammed online, you know. But it's oftentimes people have this misconception that only that stupid people get scammed. But my
Right.
goodness, Robert, I've had psychologists, doctors, scientists. These are people that are learned people, and they got scammed online. So it's a complete, it's not just stupid people. It's maybe people who are ignorant about how to be safe online, but they're certainly not stupid people. Um,
Correct. Yeah,
so
and
it
you
can
could be
happen
going
to
through
anyone, to anyone.
it. That can happen to anybody, but you could also be going through a very difficult time in your life, and
It
it
makes
can
us
mess up
susceptible.
your thought process and your
Mm.
logic, logical self. That can happen too. But in one or two of my circumstances, I these were people that I worked for, and I worked, I can't name who it was, or I don't want to tell you what company it was, but I worked for somebody who was an out and out psychopath, but I didn't know that until after I joined the company. And it's something that you're watching and you're going, this is not right. There's something about this person that is so off that you don't
Mm.
understand it, and your brain cannot figure out why this person is the way that they are. And it takes a long time to process that. Even after I was with that company for 2.5 years or whatever it was, and in all that time, I still couldn't figure this person out. Extremely manipulative to other people, even to you, and you find yourself doing things, and it makes you realize this is how things happened in throughout the centuries. Is that there are people that will do stuff for these other people that they don't want to do. They don't like doing it, but they'll do it anyway because this other person, their personality is so overwhelming and powerful that they will do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And that can happen. They're manipulative people. They know your weaknesses. They also know your weaknesses, and they know how to prey on them.
But that's how
And
it often happens is they befriend you, they get to know you, they intentionally seek out to find out what your weak spots are. And once they know that through a friendship, they will then use that to their advantage. I
right,
don't know.
but
It
they can
really
flip
is
flop.
awful.
I like that particular person flip flops. Like they could be nice to you 1 minute to get you to do something for them,
Mm.
okay, and they're mannerly, and they come across as being your buddy, your friend, because they want you to do something for them. And it's the split second that you have done what they want you to do,
Then they
they
switch.
just it's a flip, and they're the nastiest person in the world, and they're cursing at you, they're, you know, profane language. It's a complete shift in the personality of the person, and they don't mind that because they think that they can always get you back on side. And funny enough, they do, you know, and they do it to other people as well. They're horrible to them, and then they know how to get them back on side just for long enough until the next time, and then the next time,
Mm.
and then the next time, and then the next time. And so these things can wear you out. But I have found that it's interesting material for writing because it gives you an insight into some of the minds of these people and how they operate. And it does make for a good story, and you can get all your psychological troubles down on paper. And it's true, it's a form of therapy almost, you know, because you can do what
You
happened
took the
to
words out
you.
of my mouth. I was literally going to say it's a form of therapy, of sort of, writing out the storm, writing out your your thoughts, and you can go any which way you want. You know.
Yeah. And it's writing out your worst fears about these people and the things that they, you know, you have them doing it to somebody else on paper, which is great because it's somebody else now was on the receiving end of it and not you. But you also think about how these people are so horrible and manipulative, and how they you know, they come up with these elaborate responses and their elaborate excuses for their horrible behavior, which make no sense. In fact, they're terrible liars. They lie all the time, but we still come back to them, even though they lie and lie repeatedly and repeatedly and again and again and again and again and again and again. People still are drawn to them for whatever reason, and it's a fascinating experiment. As I said, there are books that are written out there that give a really good insight into the psychopathic mind. And it wasn't until after I left that particular company that I'm referring to that I came across this amazing book by I think it's a Canadian author, and he spent many years in and out of prisons and other situations dealing with psychopaths. That I was reading this book and I thought, that's the guy that I work for, the people he's describing in his book. And it made sense to me all of a sudden, because before that it doesn't make sense to you, because you cannot fathom how this person is the way that they are until you read a doctor explain to you who has a world experience of what these people really are. And he tries to tell you, you know, this is not your fault. This is not you. This is them. And the whole premise of the book was about the psychopaths among us, the people who live and breathe and are our bosses and our co-workers. And perhaps you could be a family member, or, you know, you could be married to one of these people.
That's
And
crazy.
he tries, yeah, it's crazy, but he does give you an insight and tries to help you and say, you know, it's not you, it's not your fault. And it wasn't, that was the biggest eye opener for me, was reading that book. And after that, I realized I could turn a lot of this stuff into fiction. So that's what I did. And that's much better. It's much better for the heart and the soul and the mind, is to be, instead of constantly having it up here, spinning around and messing with your head, you just
Get
create a
it, get
story
it,
from it.
get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And it's very
Yes, there you go.
therapeutic. Very therapeutic.
It is.
Who needs to
I
pay us? Who
guarantee it. And
needs to pay a
it's
psychologist,
cheaper
right?
too.
It's I was
What?
that's what I was thinking. It's cheaper than going to see a psychologist. You can just do
It is. It's
self-therapy by
cheaper.
writing.
Yes. In fact, you know what though? The therapists do recommend writing your thoughts down and the things that trouble you.
Yeah.
And so when you go to visit good therapists, they will often say to you, put what you're thinking down on paper. And for some reason, it does give a release. And
Mm.
so I started practicing that too. And then I turned it into fiction, which is even better. So I do actually recommend it. It's not psychobabble. There is actually something to it. There is something real and tangible to putting what troubles you on paper. And if you can switch from putting all your personal experiences on paper to turning something into a piece of fiction on paper, that's a really positive step forward, because it means that I think that means that you're healing in some ways, and you can get on with things, and all of a sudden you can have fun with something that once troubled you. So
Mm.
in that respect, I would definitely recommend it to anybody who's got something in their mind that's troubling them. Perhaps just see if you can turn it into a story, and you might feel a hell of a lot better afterwards because now it's happening to somebody else, not you.
Oh, absolutely. I just want to say thanks to Michael that's listening to us on Amazon. Robert, there was a psychologist I listened to one day. He's a very famous psychologist. He's got a TV show, and I can't remember his name. I'm really bad with names. But he was saying, that if you find yourself struggling with an issue, he said exactly that, write it out. And he says, you don't have to even hand the letter or whatever you've written to that person necessarily, but it's a way of getting it out of your head. And he said, if you can't give it to the person, then burn it, because that is also
Burn
just
it, yeah.
part of it's part of the process. And he said, after you've written it, then sort of consider how the person on the receiving end may respond. If you think the person's going to sort of go, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that I punched you in the nose when we were in grade one, and that this has scarred you for the rest of your life. And I'm really sorry. So that's the kind of, the one response that you would hope for, and then you would hand them what you've written. But he said, on the other hand, if you write it out and you give it to someone who's a narcissist, for example, and this person's just going to go, ha, 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 ha. I can't believe you've been stewing about this for all your life. That happened 30 years ago. How could you be so stupid? I should punch you in the nose again. So that's the kind of narcissistic person you wouldn't want to give that letter to. So you've got to sort of,
Correct, yeah.
write out your story as part of the process, and then decide, what am I going to do with this? How is the person going to receive it?
Yes. Well, when you're dealing with a psychopath, they've no feelings, they've no emotion, and they've no empathy. So if you were to
Mm,
give a letter like that to them, it wouldn't mean anything to them because they can't relate to anything that involves emotion or empathy. And until you get that right in your head, that no matter what you ever say to them, it won't register with them. They don't have these feelings. They don't have normal emotions. Everything is about them. So in that case, those letters would have to, or whatever you're saying would have to be very personal for you, and just as a method of keeping it intact with yourself, because they would laugh at you, as you said. They would think that you're an
mm.
idiot, and they don't have any sympathy for you. They don't care about you, for starters. They don't care about anybody. So they're not going to care about you. So if you have come across somebody like that in your life and you're wanting to put your ideas down on paper, keep them to yourself if you can. And I find that if you are a budding author, or you're somebody that wants to create a bit of fiction, have a little bit of fun with it as well. It really will make you feel better. And it could be anything in your life that's troubling you. You can make a nice story out of it. And you know what? It's almost like confronting your fears. If you've got a fear of something, when you confront it, it almost makes it a little bit easier to deal with then afterwards. So, some things are too emotional and too powerful, and they might be very raw to you at first, which is probably why you get it down on paper. It could be anything, and read it back to yourself, and then, burn it, then write it out again if you have to, a week from then, and then write it out
Actually, there
again
was
and again and again, and then create a
I,
story.
I don't know if you know Linda Sunshine West. She was also on the show with us on Writers Corner last year when we did the anniversary thing. But she actually
Okay.
wrote a book, and I think her book is called The Year of Fears, because what she did was she spent a year confronting a fear every single day of her life. She would tackle a different fear.
Wow.
And then she wrote about, and I
Okay.
think the book's actually called The Year of Fears. Um,
Interesting.
and yeah, and so she wrote the book and published it.
Fabulous. That's brilliant. I wonder if she could help me with my fear of needles and stuff. I mean, I've been dealing with that one for a long time, and I still can't get over it. I don't mind them. I don't mind like a flu jab. I'm happy getting a needle here and here, or in the leg or anything. But once they go to take blood, I'm a completely I go to pieces. I'm not able for that one. So, and I've been dealing with that for so many years, and I can't get over that fear. I confront that fear all the time, but it still doesn't help me. So maybe I'm talking
It's
nonsense, but
it's weird, that kind of thing. It's like people have an inordinate fear of spiders.
right.
Spiders, like, spiders doesn't scare me. I can catch these huge big rain spiders in a jar, and I'm okay with it. Whereas I know some people that would climb the wall for just a little tiny spider. But put me near a snake or a rat, oh my goodness, that's a completely
Oh,
different
really? Okay.
story. It really freaks me out.
I don't mind snakes. I don't like rats, though. Don't mind snakes at all. I like them.
Michael
Snakes
says
are
he looks the
fascinating.
other way or he gets nervous. So, so you're saying you haven't had your jab yet?
We haven't here in Ireland. I actually registered today, so it's coming. It's coming soon. So
Well, wow.
I won't have a fear of that one.
I thought we were way behind in South Africa because everywhere else everyone's had the jab, like, come and gone, the second one.
No,
And South Africa,
Europe made a mess of the whole thing. So they're and Ireland is part of the EU, and they just it was very very slow rolling out, and so they're only getting to the under 50s now in Ireland, and
yeah,
I'm right on the cusp.
well, we've just started with the over 60s. In fact, on Monday, the rollout started with the over 60s, and I
Okay,
think
yeah,
they're hoping. Jeffrey asks, is Ireland still in the EU?
yes,
Ah, okay, still in the
yeah,
EU.
yeah. So that's why we're behind with the vaccines. They made a mess of it. Over across the way in England, they were miles ahead of us. They rolled it out much faster, and
They
but
did,
the
they
EU
did.
countries were a bit slow. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they got it done very quick in Britain, but here in Ireland we're a bit behind,
So when do you
and
plan to?
only just
I
now
mean, when
catching
when do
up.
they plan to start with the doing the actual jabs?
Oh, they've done the job. I mean, they're rolling it out by year. Starting from the oldest down to the youngest, apart from people who have serious underlying conditions. So they only just got to my age group today. Today was actually the
Uh
day for
huh.
my age. So you have to register first, and then they send you a text within the next week or two, and that you can go along and get it then. So within the next 2 to 3 weeks, it looks like I'll have a job.
Yeah. So I just want to say hello to Jeffrey. That's also what joined us. And Michael says we are 15 and above here in the US. I hope other parts of the world can see their shots very soon. The US rollout seemed to have gone amazingly well. So we'll see how things goes. We've
Yeah,
just started with the over 60s, and hopefully in the next sort of 3 weeks or so, they'll start announcing, people with other comorbidities and the rest of the population. I do know a hot topic is whether or not children under 18 should get the jab. Um, that's quite a hot conversation, and I'm actually hoping to have a chat with a doctor sometime um, about that. There's so many strong opinions. You don't know who to listen to anymore. It's very
well,
confusing.
they're only opinions, and we're not medical experts. So I mean, it's
No,
a
not at
personal
all.
choice, really, isn't it? So you know, I'm doing it for me, but I'm not 18 either. I'm 49, so I figured I might as well just go ahead and do it and get it over and done with. But other people can make their own decisions. I know some people that aren't going to take it, but that's their choice. I don't really care whether they do or they don't. That's their personal opinion. They don't have to do anything they don't want to do, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm going to take it, so But that's my choice, and I'm happy to do it, even though I don't like needles
Robert
too much.
Robert, we're at the top of the hour. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour. I've really enjoyed this
Oh my
conversation.
gosh.
We could
Yeah, it's
probably go
been
on for
great.
another hour.
We probably
So
could, yes. As soon as we got onto flu jabs, we got onto flu jabs from talking about
I know,
psychopaths
right?
and flu jabs.
All
So
kinds
it's been
of
an
things.
interesting conversation.
It has been. I
Really
want to say
enjoyed it though.
thanks. Yeah, me too. Thanks very much to everyone who's joined us on Amazon Live. It was great to meet you. Michael, was nice getting to know you, and everyone else who joined us on Amazon Live. And Robert, thanks for sharing all your stories. Um,
Thank you. Thank you for having
we
me.
would, yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
So thanks everyone. You were watching Books with Bridgetti. And if you want to get some more author stories, we this is supposed to have been just a short story, but we went on for an hour because we were having so much fun just because we can. So thank you for joining us. Stay well, take care, be good, and goodbye for now.